interrupt this program to bring you Courage, the Cowardly Dog Month.
Whole month of Courage, the Cowardly Dog. First appearing in 1996, it was picked up by Cartoon Network, who work in the middle of Burbank, and directed by cartoonist John Dilworth. Though many years have passed since the original air date, it's now time for Zack to celebrate this great show.
Well, old sport, what do you think? Neat. Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to Courage Month. So, we've actually got one last thing we need to review, which is the Scooby-Doo crossover movie that with Courage the Cowardly Dog in it. So, yeah, this episode is kind of just a really good mix of the two. I actually also watched it live. You guys missed that, but I'm deciding to review it for you guys in case you did miss it. So yeah, here it is. I've been typing this up for the whole month, so if you missed it, that's on you. But in any case, this movie is just really good. It's got some genuinely funny moments to it, and it is just a really good Courage the Cowardly Dog / Scooby-Doo crossover episode. It's pretty good. It's like an hour long-ish, but it is pretty good, and I did enjoy it. And yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. But in any case, the movie actually starts off by reintroducing us to the Scooby-Doo gang. I hope I don't need to picture them because they've been around for over 50 years at this point, and odds are you know who I'm talking about. But the episode starts with them defeating a villain and unmasking him off screen. So yeah, this episode actually opens up with them unmasking a guy in a clown costume called Mr. McGill, who we were explained he had actually robbed the bank that he owned and worked at. And long story short, he just kind of robbed the bank with him. And also, this part of the movie actually sets up the fact that he's later, but it sets up that Shaggy and Scooby have actually been using an audiobook to try and become less scared. Long story short, they have an audiobook that's been telling them to do things to just kind of help them become braver one step at a time. And the first thing that the book actually suggested to them was to do something that terrifies them. So case in point, they decide to actually take a selfie with the villain before they unmask him. But which the rest of the gang kind of appreciate, and Velma points out that she's glad Shaggy and Scooby are actually trying to be a lot less scared. But in any case, after they unmasked Mr. McGill, who looks like this, he's mostly in his clown costume for most of the episode, and he's a minor villain. But in case Velma then proceeds to start going into his evil plan about how because he's the mayor, because he owns the building, because he owns the bank, he was able to actually successfully just sneak in and steal the money himself without anybody catching him. But then Scooby starts acting strange. So Scooby actually starts dancing and actually starting to freak out a little bit, and he actually starts tuning Velma out because he can barely concentrate. And Velma and long story short, Shaggy actually notices this while Velma is actually rattling off all the things he's done, and tries to ask Scooby what's wrong, but Scooby doesn't really hear Shaggy at all. He actually, all he really hears is the whole wah 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 wah. But he winds up. But in any case, Scooby then proceeds to freak out and run off, which Shaggy calls the rest of the gang's attention to, and points out that they actually do need to chase after him, and the rest of the gang quickly realize that they actually do need to go after Scooby and actually go get him, with Velma merely telling Mr. McGill that it's said that they can't actually unmask him properly, since obviously it's a family emergency, and Mr. McGill completely understands, and they actually wind up getting into the mystery machine. And after kind of a brief bit where Fred is annoyed at Shaggy for trying to drive, and annoyed at everybody else for not putting on their seatbelts, they then proceed to chase after Scooby, with Mr. McGill now completely unimpeded to do whatever he wants, and he just leaves and goes back to his life of crime. So yeah, they never actually put the bow on that mystery. The villain just straight up escapes. They never put a bow on that mystery. But in any case, meanwhile at the Bag Farmhouse, Courage is having a similar reaction to that Scooby was having a couple of minutes ago, and he's trying and failing to tell Eustace what he's asking and what he's feeling, and Eustace just kind of doesn't fully understand, or at least he doesn't really care. And eventually he gets annoyed of Courage's antics, so he just scares him off. And Courage winds up running outside to just kind of figure out what to try to get some space. Meanwhile, Scooby has actually made his way all the way to Nowhere, Kansas, on foot. And he does eventually wind up at the Bag farmhouse, where he and Scooby wind up running into each other and freak each other out a little bit until they realize that they're both dogs and actually sniff each other's butt to actually get familiar with each other. And after realizing that they're both dogs, they actually start becoming fast friends. And actually wind up bonding over the fact that they both are feeling and hearing something very strange. And they actually kind of acted out a little bit to just kind of point out that that is indeed what they're feeling. But in case, as they're kind of talking it out and kind of catching up and becoming friends, a bunch of cicadas actually wind up emerging from the ground and actually start crawling around after them. And Courage and Scooby have to actually defend the farmhouse from them and try to protect the house from the cicadas that are now emerging from the floor. And they do manage to hold them off using the trash can lids, but eventually the rest of the Mystery Inc. gang shows up, which freaks Courage and Scooby out a little bit because they don't initially know that the rest of Mystery Inc. are good guys, or at least Scooby just kind of freaks out over the fact that their car is there. He doesn't really acknowledge the fact that he doesn't really freak out over the fact that he doesn't think they're good guys, but rather the fact that he doesn't know who's actually in the mystery machine at the moment. But in case they all show up and run over some of the cicadas, and then the rest of the Mystery Inc. gang gets out, and Daphne, for whatever reason, has a crochet mallet, which she just has. It's never really explained why she has it. She says she's been practicing, but she then uses it to swat away a couple of cicada with Fred just complimenting her on her swing, pointing out that it must have been at least 50 yards, and at which point she mentions she's been practicing. At which point Muriel actually walks out, sees Courage and with all of his new friends, and actually invites them in to kind of hang out and have some snacks, pointing out that she's actually making her Scotch Dream cookies, and she would very much appreciate if they came in and had some. And obviously they're not going. The Mystery Inc. gang, they're not a rude bunch of folks. They'll happily accept free food. So they do decide to take Muriel up on their offer and come inside. At which point they meet Eustace, and Eustace isn't very receptive to them at all. Obviously, Muriel tells Eustace to make them at home, but Eustace is just annoyed that they're kind of blocking the TV, and Muriel decides to just leave and go make her cookies, and once again tells Eustace to make the guests feel welcome. But Eustace again, he's not very good with people, so he just kind of stares at them for a little bit, and eventually the gang decides to actually break the ice and wave to him, and he kind of just grumbles about them being in his house, and they decide to just. And Courage, realizing that Eustace is not going to be any sort of help, proceeds to escort them into the kitchen, and they decide to leave with Eustace mumbling to himself of stupid meddling kids, which is really, really, really goddamn funny. But in case they then proceed to go into the kitchen, where Muriel has finished up her Scottish Dream cookies and is actually offering them to the gang, and in the process proceeds to ask them about who they are and what it is they actually do. And Muriel and Velma is actually the one to explain what it is they actually do, explaining that they're a professional mystery solving team, and they go around town go around various towns in the U.S. inside their mystery machine, and they solve mysteries for various people. With Muriel actually remarking that that's very lovely, and she also remarks that being professional riddle solvers is a very admirable thing to be, and actually offers Velma a riddle, pointing out that she actually knows a few riddles herself, and Velma can't understand it, but she doesn't fully understand. She doesn't fully grasp the riddle as well. I wasn't really paying attention during this part, I'll admit, and there's a good reason for that, because in the background of this conversation, Courage is actually asked by Muriel to unclog the sink, and so he and Scooby actually go to do that, and in the process, a giant furball-like monster actually starts attacking them, and they wind up having to deal with that, while this entire conversation is just yada-yadaing away in the background. They have no idea what's actually going on, but in any case, Muriel continues to pull out her dream cookie, since another batch of her Scottish dream cookie, since obviously Courage was dealing with a drain monster and couldn't actually eat any of them. But Muriel really reassures them that there's plenty left, and asks the kids if they would actually like some, and obviously Shaggy is the first one to speak out, pointing out that he and Scooby are more than happy to take some off her hands, pointing out that they just love food, and if it's free, that's all the better. So Muriel proceeds to actually get the Scotch Dream cookies out of the oven with Courage's help, but in the process, Courage notices something hanging on to Shaggy and begins to freak out and tell everybody about it, but nobody fully understands what's going on until Shaggy feels something crawling on his back, and then it turns around and there's a cicada hanging off of him, and a very big one at that. And Muriel actually grabs her broom and actually tries to swat it off of him, trying to actually swat the cicada off of him, and eventually she asks Daphne to help her with the door, and then Shaggy ducks, and Muriel just swats it off and sends it flying. Which is at this point where Velma actually brings up a big part of the mystery, which is that, long story short, she's noticed that the cicadas are a lot bigger than what they normally used to, and she also notes that that's a very strange thing, and also has been doing a little bit of research, and points out that there's actually something very strange, and there's got to be a reason the cicadas are all emerging all at once, and there's also got to be a reason why they're so massive. But in any case, she then proceeds to start exposing her theories about what she believes, and about what she believes is causing the cicadas to grow very massive, and also points out that there's the very strange noise that both Scooby and Courage have been hearing. Even explaining that it's possibly on a higher frequency that only dogs can hear. And this is where she just starts losing Muriel, because Muriel even points out that even she's not that smart, but she does manage to keep up all the same about all the things that Velma's trying to explain to her. But in any case, Shaggy's still kind of trying to recover from the fact that there was a cicada on his back. So Muriel merely suggests that they actually go into the living room and try to talk it out and try to make each other feel better. So Courage, Scooby, and Shaggy actually wind up going into the living room, and while they actually kind of figure out what they all have in common, they, with much to Eustace's annoyance, who's trying to read his newspaper, and they're talking too loud, so he's annoyed with them. But in any case, while they're actually discussing about what makes them afraid, Shaggy actually mentions that they're actually using the self-help book to actually try and not be as afraid. So, and they decide to show Courage it to actually help him maybe not be as afraid and not to be so terrified. And in the process, they actually wind up making themselves a little bit more scared, because the actual lesson that they wind up getting from the book is to talk about your fears. And the book then proceeds to point out that that they have something really, really, really scary, and which only causes them to get more and more paranoid, because of the way the book actually phrases it. They eventually decide to actually talk about all the things that they actually find terrifying. So obviously, Scooby and Shaggy actually talk about some of the things they've dealt with, about aliens and mummies and a whole bunch of other things that they've encountered throughout the series, whereas Courage just gives them basically a slideshow presentation using his whole shape-shifting powers they may or may not have, but he uses his cartoon physics to actually explain all the different wacky threats that he's faced during his own series. And they don't fully understand what he's talking about, but they do point out that they can sense his fear, and do point out that that is a very good thing. But in any case, as they're actually talking about all of this, there's suddenly a knock at the door, and Muriel walks out, wondering if Eustace is going to get it, but Eustace just wants to go back to reading his paper. So Daphne actually winds up getting it, and they actually discover a they actually wind up discovering a letter on the porch with an invite telling them that the mayor of Nowhere would wish to see them and would like to discuss some things with them. And Velma is actually very happy about that because, as she points out, they can actually use that point to actually, long story short, they could probably figure out some things about Nowhere as she points out. Nowhere has a lot of really weird things about it, and considering the mayor is kind of the, elected official of the town, she points out that he may indeed know something. And also, again, this has been, I've commented on this a lot, but, this episode also once again reaffirms that the mayor may exist because he actually has a completely different design in this. I will get to that. He has that's why I haven't pictured him. He frequently has different designs depending on the episode, so there's no one consistent design for him. He's very much all over the damn place. But in any case, the entire group actually winds up getting into their cars, but Eustace is completely doesn't want to actually get in the mystery machine because, as he points out to himself, it's gaudy and he doesn't like the look of it. He feels that he has, to be fair to Eustace, the mystery machine is very 70s. It has a very 70s color scheme to it, and to be fair, that is exactly what it is. It's supposed to be this old Winnebago from the 70s. It's supposed to look like this old hippie van. But in any case, when Eustace insists that he's going to drive his own truck, Muriel merely suggests that he actually bring the dogs with him, which Eustace is less than happy about, since obviously Kurt, he doesn't like Courage, or at least he's very in denial about liking Courage, and he hasn't really known Scooby long enough, but it's safe to assume that if he doesn't like the one dog, he's not gonna like the other one. So he just tells them to buckle up and not drool over everything, with Scooby merely remarking that he doesn't drool, but or at least not much, according to his own admission. But then we actually meet a much bigger cicada queen, which winds up actually taking over control of Eustace's truck and driving off. It's unclear where Eustace actually is, but he winds up but it's clear that he's not driving the truck. Not sure what happened to him. I'm not entirely sure what happened to him in the scene. He just up and disappears, and the cicada queen takes his truck. So I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what's going on there. But in any case, they then proceed to actually. In any case, the Muriel and as well as the rest of the Mystery Inc. gang are actually driving along the road, and Velma actually remarks that she's happy to actually go be talking to the mayor because, as she points out, she reiterates the mayor may know a couple of things about the town. And Muriel merely remarks that since they have time before they actually get there, she decides to actually fill Velma in on another riddle. Once again, the answer to the riddle is the stars. I was actually paying attention for this one, but the answer to the riddle is the stars. And Velma is once again dumbfounded that she doesn't actually understand it. But Muriel just reassures her, pointing out that she learned all of these riddles when she was a young girl, and obviously Velma isn't expected to know the answer right away. She has many years before she's old and senile, like Muriel is, as Muriel points out. But in any case, as they're actually driving, they actually suddenly get rammed by Eustace's truck with the Queen Cicada actually driving, and which just results in one of the funniest lines ever, where Fred actually looks out through his rear view mirror and remarks that there's some sort of large monster thing driving the truck, and Muriel just responds to call him Eustace, dear, which is just really funny. It is because you're just the cicada thing. He's just like. It's just like there's this large thing driving the truck, but it winds up not being a thing. But in any case, they wind up getting into a bit of a chase sequence with the cicada queen in the truck, pointing out that they actually have to rescue Scooby and Courage from the cicada queen, but long story short, it just winds up in a chase sequence where they chase each other through the various cliffs of Nowhere and almost fall off a couple of times as the cicada queen tries to ram them with Eustace's truck. And it does eventually get to the point where they have to cross a bridge, and Cicada Queen actually winds up cutting the ropes on the bridge, which causes which nearly causes both cars to actually fall in. The Cicada Queen actually winds up getting the truck to safety while the mystery machine. Yeah. So as it turns out, and I mean, Eustace's truck ultimately does wind up falling in anyway, and actually winds up falling into the pit, but or at least it almost does. But it's revealed that for whatever reason, and this is just a really funny sequence, but I don't fully understand why, but for whatever reason, Daphne installed gadgets into the mystery machine that enables it to do other things. So yeah, she actually winds up using a turbo booster to actually jump over and chase after the truck, which is still driving down the road, and they continue chasing after it. But eventually they do wind up chasing the Cicada Queen off. But in the process, Eustace's truck winds up going over the cliff, and they wind up but at which point Daphne reveals another one of her gadgets, which is revealed that she actually installed a grappling hook and both in the front and in the back, which they then use to try and pull Courage and Scooby to safety. They actually wind up latching the one in onto the bumper of the truck, but the bumper's about to come off, so that's not going to work out very well. And whereas the other one winds up getting hooked onto a cliff, and they actually manage to pull themselves to safety. But in any case, Fred merely just hollers to Scooby to actually grab Courage and actually get to the bumper before it falls off. With Muriel merely reiterating that sentiment, pointing out that she just doesn't really care what happens to the truck as long as they save Courage. And Scooby actually winds up doing that. He actually winds up picking up Courage in his jaws and actually winds up grabbing the grappling hook. And they actually wind up being winched to safety. And at which point Eustace shows up. I'm not entirely sure where he went for that entire segment, but long story short, he shows up and is visibly upset about the fact that something bad has happened to his truck. And initially, it doesn't seem like anything as bad has happened. In fact, it actually winds up landing safely on some rocks and actually winds up going down like some Goldberg section of it. But they wind up being saved. The truck actually winds up getting to safety somewhat, and Shaggy merely reassures Eustace, who he actually frequently calls throughout this movie the angry old dude, which fair. But he does reassure Eustace, pointing out that his truck is probably fine. But then Eustace's truck lands on a stalagmite and then proceeds to explode. So definitely not. And Eustace just annoyed at the fact that his truck has blown up, decides to actually get into the mystery machine anyway. And they proceed to actually arrive at the mayor's house, which is this big massive house. And they actually manage to get out and go knock at the door, but then a man named Herr Glockenspiel actually shows up, and he's just freaky looking. Just there's long story short, he answers the door, and the entire group actually winds up freaking out. But in any case, they actually wind up knocking on the door again. This time, Fred is in the lead because Daphne actually glares at him for making her answer the door again. So he winds up doing it, and he does wind up knocking on the door, and though he is kind of shaking like a leaf, he does eventually enunciate his point, which is that they were actually invited for dinner, and we're wondering if they can come in, and Eustace just adds to that point, pointing out that he just wants free food. So in any case, they actually wind up getting into in any case, Herr Glockenspiel, as his full name is, Mr. Glockenspiel actually lets them in, and actually shows them around the house with them only remarking that they actually want free food, that they actually do want free food, actually more accurately, it's just Eustace bellowing about that. But in any case, they proceed to walk in and wonder if he's been working for the mayor for a while, and he merely shrugs to them, and then he proceeds to leave them in a waiting room while he goes to get the mayor. And initially everything seems completely normal, with them remarking that the mayor's house is very nice and looks very pleasant, and Velma even outright wonders what kind of man the mayor is, and Muriel just kind of shrugs at that, pointing out that she didn't really know that nowhere had a mayor, which fair, and remarks that she doesn't really know what kind of man he is either. But in any case, they don't really have much time to actually think it out, because for whatever reason, the chairs in the room actually come to life and start trying to eat them. So yeah, there's just this big long extended sequence where both parties are actually trying to defend themselves from the giant chair monsters. Obviously, Courage picks up Muriel and winds up running circles around the chair, while Shaggy and Scooby wind up jumping into each other's arms and try to run off. They actually try, and also Eustace is just trying to bat at one of the chairs with his hat, which is ineffective but funny. But eventually the mayor does show up and actually gets them out of the room and proceeds to slam the door shut, and proceeds to actually just slam the door shut so that the monster chairs can't actually get out. And he apologizes for that, pointing out that he's terribly sorry and that the house is very old and sometimes some strange things happen. At which point the Velma then proceeds to bring him the invitation, pointing out that they got an invitation to eat at his house, and actually discuss some things. And the mayor is very confused at first, and he even actually winds up giving it a taste test to see if it's actually legit. And when he finds out it is, he's even more confused, since he points out that he didn't remember inviting them to his house, but he figured if they have an invitation, they might as well come in and eat. And Eustace even returns this sentiment back at him, pointing out that he obviously he didn't vote for the guy, so he doesn't really care. So, but in any case, the mayor then proceeds to escort them to his eating chambers, where he remarks that Mr. Glockenspiel and his wife are actually the ones preparing food, he then proceeds to not so ominously mention that they either worked in a prison or served time in prison. He's not entirely sure which only freaks Shaggy, Scooby, and Courage out a little bit, and to a lesser extent Eustace. But in any case, with that, Velma then proceeds to start picking the mayor's brain and actually points out everything she's figured out so far. About the giant, she remarks the giant cicadas, about how they've been ravaging nowhere, and she's a little bit curious as to where they're coming from. But the mayor just kind of dismisses her, pointing out that that's just natural in nowhere. That all the insects are giant, apparently, according to him. All the insects are very giant and massive, and according to himself, they are just massive, and they all know how to drive vehicles. When Velma brings that up. But in case, also in the background of this entire section, Eustace actually does a bit of a knock-knock joke. Which apparently, I don't remember the joke, but according to Muriel, it's actually very rude, and very dismissive, but and very rude and not for like table manners, which Eustace remarks is a bit hypocritical, considering that both Courage and Scooby currently have their hands up on the table and have their feet on the table, which Scooby merely remarks that they're all feet, so that's not really on them. But in any case, Velma continues onward with her theory, remarking that she didn't even know nowhere existed before they got there. Pointing out that she's actually had to do a bit of research on her tablet, though she remarks that the internet's been a bit spotty, which I think we can all relate to. And he remarks that there's been a lot of strange and unusual things happening throughout the city and town of nowhere, and the mayor merely remarks that that is 100% possible she's never heard of nowhere before, because as he points out, and this is accompanied by a visual gag, they're a little off the map. There's like a map of the world, and then there's just a map of nowhere down below it. So, which is very funny. But in case the mayor then proceeds to point out that he'd be happy to actually ask the group any of their questions, but as he remarks, he's very busy and only really had time for dinner. So he remarks that if they would absolutely love to learn more, he, for whatever reason, has a museum wing in his house that they can go visit and actually learn more about, which Velma actually does thank him for and asks them if they can show him the way, and he responds that he would absolutely be glad and happy to. So he actually winds up leading them away to actually go and long story short, he just takes them to the room and then proceeds to close the door, at which point they all proceed to investigate around the room. And I should mention, the mayor's house in general is big and just full of Easter eggs to the rest of the series, but the museum room is just a big massive Easter egg dump. This room is just a who's who of who's appeared in Courage the Cowardly Dog. You've got pictures of Freaky Fred. You've got the Mask from The Mask. And you've got a bunch of other references to Courage the Cowardly Dog that are all just in this room. And if you want to actually see the movie for yourself, I highly recommend it. But there was just a large massive group of Easter eggs in this room. But in case as they're actually investigating and Muriel is actually helping Dust because she notes that the museum is very dusty. They actually stumble across a small TV where they turn it on, and the Nowhere newsman proceeds to give them a brief history of Nowhere. This is very much just informative for people who didn't watch the original Courage the Cowardly Dog. People who didn't watch the series, this is just to tell everybody about, hey, this is everything you missed when this show first aired. Go watch it or watch this. This is going to be your summary for the series. But in any case, they have a couple of things that they nod to, like obviously the Mask, Cats and LaQuack from the museum thing, and Cats and LaQuack are from the actual episode where they're actually the main antagonists of that series, and there are also a couple of other things that they bring up about how the Nowhere is a geological hotspot for all things weird. But in case, the only people who actually haven't joined the rest of the group are obviously the two dogs, and then Shaggy and Eustace, who all remark that they actually want food and aren't actually going to leave until they get some. And after a brief moment with Glockenspiel's wife, who shows up and cuts their bread for them because they can't actually eat it because it's too hard. And Eustace decides to actually complain. They decide to actually go and make their own food. Where they actually, and at which point the four of them actually go through the hallway, and Eustace actually takes the opportunity to actually scare them with his Ooga Booga mask, which he remarks never gets old. He does this a couple of times throughout the movie, but it is just a recurring thing that this is a recurring bit for a reason. It never gets old. But in any case, they then proceed to go into the kitchen where Shaggy and Scooby actually demonstrate their ability to make impressive, massive sandwiches. And then proceed to do exactly that using everything in the kitchen, and which I did remark during the actual watch along. Probably not the best idea to do that when it's not your house. But in any case, they proceed to just pull a bunch of things out of the fridge and start making sandwiches. But and at one point, there's actually a joke where Scooby actually goes to put mustard on a sandwich, and it keeps making a fart noise, which he then decides to riff off of, which only causes Shaggy and Courage to actually break down into laughter. And Eustace eventually gets frustrated with them and proceeds to actually go look through the pantry for some more stuff. But the Glockenspiels actually show up in the closet, and he decides to slam the door and decides that he's had enough and decides to actually leave. And he just pieces out and goes back home. I don't know how long it took him, considering he didn't have his truck, which is currently blown up. But I'm just assuming he walked all the way back from the mayor's house back to the back farmhouse, and there's just nothing else to say about that. He just leaves. But in case, with Eustace gone, they then Shaggy, Scooby, and Courage decide to actually go and look for some more ingredients to see if they can actually make their sandwich even more impressive. At which point, the Cicada Queen actually appears in the closet, and what follows is just a classic Scooby-Doo chase sequence. If you guys have watched any of the Scooby-Doo shows, you'll know that there's usually a couple of bits that occur during these classic sequences, namely that Shaggy and Scooby use misdirection to actually trick the villain into doing a thing while they escape, and also running through a bunch of doors and that seemingly lead to nowhere, and then just popping out doors that aren't connected to one another before running out of the hallway. And the movie has both of those, but with an added wrinkle to that Courage is involved in all of these. And the sequence that they decide to use to actually distract the Cicada Queen during this chase sequence is to actually trick it into being a fumigator. Long story short, they trick it into fumigating the house, and which is kind of ironic considering it's a giant cicada. But I get the feeling Shaggy and Scooby know that's not a real cicada at this point, or at the very least, this is the thing they do with every villain. But obviously, with some exceptions, most Scooby-Doo villains are guys in costumes, or otherwise they're supernatural creatures. And I'm not gonna lie, this film has a bit of both. I'll get to that. But or at least we've already seen that with with the clown. But in any case, but yeah, we've seen that with Mr. McCree. But in any case, the sequence actually winds up ending with them actually hiding inside one of the bed, actually running into the mayor, who winds up getting attacked by a cicada queen and actually winds up disappearing. And there's just a cicada where he used to be, and Scooby, Shaggy, and Courage all freak out because they realize he's actually been turned into cicada by the cicada queen, and they proceed to run into his bedroom, where they try to hide from him. But then the cicada queen actually follows them into the wardrobe where they're hiding, and actually offers Scooby a tissue for when he starts sneezing, which freaks him out once they realize that the cicada queen has followed them inside. So they run off. At which point they actually see the. And this is, I'm bringing it up now, but this is also a recurring thing throughout all of this. They keep, during this entire chase sequence, they keep frequently running into the glockenspiels, who are just going about their business. They're terrifying. I should mention this. They're a bit scary looking, but they're not dangerous. They don't want it. They couldn't care less about Scooby, Shaggy, and Courage just running around the house, trying to get away from the cicada queen. But there is just a sequence where they actually run into them, and they wind up freaking out and hiding. But they have no interest, so they just leave. At which point, but eventually it does get to the point where they are racing through the house, and eventually a bunch of cicadas actually wind up emerging from the floors and roofs, walls, and ceilings of the mayor's house, and they proceed to actually run as far as they can and try to get into the and actually wind up in the museum wing as the rest of the gang is actually and Muriel, as the rest of the gang and Muriel actually wind up finishing their documentary, and long story short, Courage, Scooby, and Shaggy wind up boarding up the door with Muriel remarking that that's a very good barricade, but it doesn't wind up working. The cicadas actually wind up getting in anyway, and they wind up and in the process, Muriel and the rest of the gang actually wind up setting off at a hidden switch where they were standing, and the bookshelf with the giant rotating thing actually winds up disappearing and actually wind up going through a wall with at which point Courage, Scooby, and Shaggy proceed to try and run away, get as far away from they can, and proceed to actually continue running through the house. And at which point they note that they actually proceed to continue investigating. Once the gang actually recovers, they note that the bookshelf they actually got turned around on. They note that there's a couple of history books missing from the bookshelf and wonder where they actually went to. But they then proceed to go deeper inside the cave and discover a large machine, which Velma and Muriel actually wind up figuring out what it does. So yeah, they wind up. Apparently Velma figures out what it is. It's this giant machine that's actually meant to make frequencies, which enables them to actually jack into various radio towers at random and actually make phone calls. And Muriel points out that it seems like it's still running. And indeed it is. The machine is actually making several phone calls. Even Mr. McCree at one point, he's in his apartment hiding out from the law, and he winds up getting a phone call, which causes them all to become, and all of them wind up becoming hypnotized. And I will explain what happens with that almost immediately, because when they try to figure out what the machine actually does, we are then cut to Eustace in the Bag farmhouse where he's since come home and has decided to make himself a sandwich. He pointing out that this is a proper way to make a sandwich because he actually got a little bit perturbed by Scooby and Shaggy trying to make sandwiches, so he decided he was going to make his own. At which point there's a knock at the door, and all of the strangers that called him and that got a phone call from the hypnotic machine, they wind up bringing all of their treasures and and precious valuables to Eustace. They wind up depositing it at the Bag farmhouse, and long story short, Eustace Eustace doesn't complain. In fact, he's actually very happy about the fact that he's rich. And then, I kid you not, probably the best part of the entire movie, Eustace starts rapping. I kid you not, he has his own song in this movie and everything. And the song itself is called Out of Nowhere. But the song is just a really fun song where Eustace just raps about how rich he is, and it's just great. It's the best thing ever. I love it to death. It is probably the best thing I have ever seen, and it's not even close. It's great. I love it. But in any case, as Scooby and Shaggy are continuing to run and also to a lesser extent, Courage are back at the farmhouse and continue to actually run as far as they can away from the Cicada Queen. They eventually wind up falling down a hole and landing on top of the machine that the rest of the group was investigating. And they remark that and Velma and Muriel remarks that whatever that machine was doing, it's not doing it anymore. So with that they remark that with that Shaggy then proceeds to notice that the water in the cave that they're actually in is dripping up, which kind of freaks them out a little bit, and they don't fully understand what's going on. At which point they actually start floating, which everybody remarks is actually a little bit strange. But Velma actually uses her big brain and remarks that there's actually only a couple of properties of materials that can actually do this, which I call shenanigans on, because she points out that they're actually elements, but no element enables you to float. I'm going to be perfectly 100% honest. There is nothing that can enable you to float. So, yeah. But in case she then proceeds to point out that she has some other things that she needs to bring up. But she remarks that now that with a little bit more, she thinks she'll be able to figure out what's going on. But in any case, they proceed to actually leave and get ready to go through to get out of the cave. Pointing out that there has to be an exit nearby somewhere. And all the while, the Cicada Queen is actually watching them and eyeballing them. But in any case, they do eventually wind up getting out and through a cellar door, which conveniently, as Muriel points out, happens to be right next to where the house is. As it turns out, they just have to cut straight through a cornfield and they're home. But it is at this point where Shaggy, Scooby, and Courage actually refuse, pointing out that they remark that they're not going into the cornfields, and with Fred, which Fred points out is kind of a little bit ludicrous, considering that they ate 3 or 4 ears of corn. That Shaggy and Scooby ate 3 or 4 ears of corn this morning, and they're eating some, and Shaggy, Scooby, and Courage are eating some now. But they merely remark that it's not that is not the corn, and then ask Daphne to explain. So, and then they just proceed to make a fourth wall joke where and this has been a recurring thing in every iteration of Scooby-Doo, but they merely remark that long story short, Scooby they just bring up that now's the point of the story where Scooby and Shaggy and now Courage refuse to do something, and they need to be offered a treat to continue forward with solving the mystery, which is a really funny fourth wall gag. But in any case, Muriel realizing that she actually has some cookies on her, which she remarks are homemade, she offers them some Courage snacks, which are like Scooby snacks, but homemade and made with love. With and Shaggy and Scooby even remark that they never actually get homemade Scooby snacks, and asks why Daphne never makes them homemade Scooby snacks for them. And Daphne doesn't really have an answer. She's just like, I don't know. She just kind of gets really flustered and realizes she doesn't really have a straight answer. But in any case, with that little segment out of the way, they then proceed to go through the cornfield where they actually wind up being but then the cicadas actually wind up chasing after them, and they run through the cornfield and into a clearing where they actually discover a couple of discarded cicada shells. With Velma merely pointing out that they must be in the stage where they've actually started molting and more terrifyingly have grown wings. With Daphne actually remarking that actually is a bit more terrifying, and Scooby, Shaggy, and Courage all agree with her. But in case, it's at this point where the cicadas actually wind up showing up, and now with their newfound wings, they wind up snatching up the rest of the group one by one. This is long story short, the monster, they actually show up, and under the leadership of the Cicada Queen, they actually wind up snatching up the rest of the group, say for Scooby, Shaggy, and Courage, and Velma actually winds up dropping her tablet in the process, remarking that they need to get back to the farmhouse, since she believes since she points out that the farmhouse is actually in the center of everything, and tells them that they actually do need to get to the farmhouse and actually solve the mystery and dig up the source, as she puts it, before she's actually carried off. At which point the trio now proceed to actually freak out a little bit, since now they've actually lost their leadership. But it's at this point where Shaggy decides that he's actually had enough and decides to actually man up a little bit. So Shaggy actually remarks that that's not so really much that they obviously they have every right to be scared. But as he points out, and as his audiobook actually tells them and persuades them, the book actually tells them that true courage isn't the absence of fear; it's taking action despite fear, which is one of the most famous quotes, hashtag Monday motivations you will ever hear. But in any case, Shaggy then proceeds to riff on that, pointing out that. Yeah, he knows he's not the kind of guy who usually take charge, but he's decided he's had enough, and that if he's going to actually save his friends, he's going to need to man up and actually be a bit brave, and proceeds to give this entire movie thing about how if they have a little bit of courage, if they have a little courage, that they can actually do anything. But then as he's giving this massive moving speech, he winds up getting picked up by a cicada and is carried off. So yeah, that puts an end to that whole thing. But at which point they realize that Scooby and Courage realize they're the only ones who can actually help the rest of the gang work out what it is they need to do. And proceed to remark that, and proceed to realize that they actually need to figure out what Velma actually meant, and realizing they dropped her tablet, they actually go and pick it up, and realizing that they actually do need to actually they don't really know how to turn it on. Courage actually suggests an idea that they can use, and proceed to go back to the farmhouse after emerging from the cornfield. And they take a mental note of noticing that Eustace is actually swimming in a pool of money on the living room floor. But Courage merely just shrugs it off, and they go up to the attic, where they actually go talk to the Bag family computer, because it is time for that part of the plot in Courage the Cowardly Dog as well. So they actually wind up Courage actually winds up giving a very in-depth query of the computer, who can't understand and doesn't fully understand what's going on, what they actually are asking, since he needs more information. So Courage decides to actually plug Velma's tablet into the computer, and in between the computer actually explaining what's going on. This is the funniest thing ever as well. But the computer, Velma's tablet, and the bad computer flirt. I kid you not, they wind up becoming romantically involved. That is not a plot point I thought I would ever be seeing in a Courage the Cowardly Dog episode / Scooby-Doo movie, but here we are. But in case Courage then proceeds to clear his throat and get them to focus. So the computer and the tablet proceed to explain how there's actually a massive meteor that first and foremost is believed to have wiped out the dinosaurs, but the computer proceeds to explain how. But the two computers proceed to explain how it's a meteor made out of dark matter, which would explain the cause of all of Nowhere's weirdness, and they proceed to explain how it's more or less directly underneath them, and that all they have to do is dig it up. So at which point the computer and tablet go back to flirting. So Courage and Scooby decide to give them some privacy after thanking them for the information. At which point they proceed to actually start digging, and what they do is they actually follow the rhythmic dancing and freak out that they've been having to actually go and find the meteor. And while it does kind of slow them down a little bit, it doesn't stop them, and they do eventually find a massive cavern underneath the farmhouse, where they start floating, and they eventually realize that the meteor is actually sitting smack dab in the middle of the cavern. And interestingly enough, it is on a giant machine that is just set up in the middle of the house. And we're rather in the middle of the cavern, and Courage and Scooby proceed to go try to take it and try and figure out what the machine actually is. But then they're cornered by the Cicada Queen and her massive army of cicadas, and they quickly realize they actually need to get the meteor out of there, and they proceed to get into another massive chase sequence where they're playing keep away with the meteor to actually keep the Cicada Queen off their toes. And eventually they actually wind up in a cave where they freak out a little bit because they see a bunch of bodies hanging around, until they realize that the bodies are actually their friends and Muriel. So they wind up freeing the rest of the Mystery Inc. gang and Muriel, and they wind up trying to figure out how to get out of the cave. And eventually this winds up becoming a game of keep away with the Cicada Queen, where the opposite of weird is fun actually plays in the background, which is another really fun song from this episode. Not as memorable as Out of Nowhere, but definitely a good part of this movie as well. And I do very much recommend the movie again. But in case they then proceed to play a bit of keep away, which causes the meteor to actually transform the gang into a bunch of various things. And Daphne actually winds up transforming into a video game. What is it? Muriel actually winds up turning into a duck. And a couple of other weird, funny things happen to the gang before Courage eventually gets the meteor back and spins it on his finger to turn everybody back to normal, and also reverse gravity so that they can actually escape the cave. And they proceed to climb out of the cave and through the hole that Courage and Scooby dug earlier to actually get away from the Cicada Queen, with the Cicada Queen actually becoming angry with them and trying to chase after them. And the Cicada Queen does eventually catch up to them. The cave actually winds up collapsing because of what they've done, because the meteor actually makes the entire cavern unstable just by being itself and just existing. The meteor being a thing that exists actually just destabilizes the cave system, and it winds up coming down on top of their heads. So yeah, because the meteor is made of dark matter, and dark matter is very finicky and very unstable. So obviously it's causing the cave to collapse just by being played around with and being flung around. So yeah, but they eventually wind up getting into the hole, but it's at this point where the Cicada Queen actually manages to catch up to them and manages to snatch up Muriel, who is currently holding the meteor, and tries to carry her off, but she winds up dropping the meteor, and in the process winds up being carried out of the hole, because the Cicada Queen doesn't realize that she's actually dropped the meteor. So Courage actually winds up picking it up and actually chases them out of the hole, and proceeds to actually tie it into his ears to actually get the Cicada Queen's attention and lower it away from Muriel so that it'll actually come after him. At which point, Scooby actually winds up picking it up and winds up tossing it back to Courage so he can continue playing with it and keeping it away from the Cicada Queen. And also the Mystery Ink. But then eventually the cave system collapses and they're unable to actually get out of the hole where they were. But in any case, they wind up on the surface in front of the back farmhouse, and the Cicada Queen does eventually get the meteor, and then uses the meteor to make itself giant. So, and also causes the various pieces of the back farmhouse and the surrounding land to start floating, and basically just becomes a giant final boss thing. But in case Courage is actually freaking out because he realizes that he's not actually going to be able to actually face off against the Cicada Queen, but then he remembers what Shaggy said about having a little courage and where they can face everything, and realizing that taking it quite literally because his name is Courage, he decides to actually brave up and actually gets into a fight against the Cicada Queen. And eventually, he manages to get the meteor away from the Cicada Queen by climbing up its arms and heads and legs, and eventually he manages to get it away and becomes giant himself, and at which point the Cicada Queen and the giant cicada start fighting each other, while Muriel goes to cower in the hole with the rest of the gang so that they can actually kind of keep safe, because obviously the Cicada Queen is very much after them. But and while Courage does initially have the upper hand, the Cicada Queen does eventually beat him into a pulp, with the Mystery Ink gang remarking that they can't bear to watch. Eventually Muriel does manage to actually get when she realizes that Courage has actually dropped the meteor, she actually runs over to actually pick it up and winds up using it to actually return Courage to normal, so that the Cicada Queen's fists actually just miss him, and he winds up picking up the meteor and actually running off. At which point, and also tying it in his ears, and they wind up climbing up the back windmill, with the Cicada Queen actually trying to rip the windmill apart to actually get to Courage. But Courage is just expertly dodging the Cicada Queen, and eventually the Cicada Queen does actually manage to rip up the giant meteor. But then Courage uses the meteor to actually return gravity and everything else to normal, and also as well as the Cicada Queen. And then the Cicada Queen winds up getting trapped in a giant cage made out of windmill parts, and then the windmill itself lands on top of her. And the Cicada Queen winds up being defeated that way. At which point with everything now back to normal, Courage and Muriel actually wind up hugging with Muriel remarking that Courage had brought down the giant Cicada Queen and is very proud of him for doing that. Well, Courage just kind of gives her a hug back, remarking that she's just happy that she's safe. At which point, Mr. Ink prepares to actually unmask the giant Cicada Queen, which is revealed to be the mayor. As it turns out, the mayor is actually the one responsible for everything, which they remark is very strange. But Muriel even remarks that she doesn't understand why such a nice man would actually go forth with this whole plot of actually trying to steal the meteor and actually awaken the cicadas. At which point Velma reveals that they're actually not the true culprit, and then proceeds to unmask the mayor, who is revealed to be a robot, and the true culprits behind the whole thing are Cats and LaQuack. As it turns out, they teamed up again. So yeah, that's it. So yeah, and obviously the group is very much confused as to what their true motivations could actually be, since obviously Katz is a dangerous psychopath and LeQuack is just greedy. So Katz and LeQuack actually wind up explaining what their plan was, which is that they wound up finding out that the meteor existed. They found out that, and they actually realized that they would need some sort of cover to actually figure out more about what's going on with the whole situation regarding the meteor and where to find it. Since they knew it existed, they just didn't know where to look. So, under the guise of the mayor, they wound up stealing some town records and wound up getting themselves elected so that they could actually continue to investigate the mayor's house, even though they should live in the house in the first place. But yeah. And then proceed to point out that once they figured out where to dig, they realized that they wound up retrieving it, but then realized that they can actually use the meteor to their advantage to actually kind of carry out their own evil schemes. Which, and in Cat's case, control the giant army cicadas so that they could actually keep everything away, from where they were digging and actually keep the dig site safe. While LeQuack actually uses it to actually make himself rich behind his wildest dreams by bringing all of the treasure to the back farmhouse, which is revealed to actually be relevant. Because then it turns out Eustace isn't actually rich. They were going to rob him blind, but LeQuack remarks that they brought everything to the back farmhouse so they could steal it later. And they proceed to remark that they could have gotten away with it, but if it weren't for their meddling kids. But then the Glockenspiels actually show up and are revealed to be the general and his lieutenant. They show up at the last minute and declare that they're actually there to not only arrest Katz and LeQuack, but take the meteor back to their test site so that they can actually dispose of it properly. But in any case, Katz proceeds to remark that he would like to actually continue and finish up properly. So he then proceeds to actually go into the spiel again about how he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for the mangling kids. But then the gang tries to unmask him because they don't realize he's actually a cat and LeQuack is actually a duck. They don't realize that it's not actually a mask. Yeah, and it is after a lot of poking and prodding that Katz and LeQuack finally had to explain that yes, they are indeed an evil mastermind genius who happens to be a cat and a card artist who happens to be a duck. But the gang still doesn't fully understand, since they point out that's kind of preposterous. But then they actually finally finish up the fact that they would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids. At which point the general actually asks the family for the group for the meteor so that they can take it back to their base, and the general actually winds up retrieving the meteor, but he actually winds up dancing, and he actually winds up liking the feeling of it. At which point Courage decides on an idea that would actually make everybody happy, which is to set up the meteor as a disco ball in the back farmhouse, and they wind up ending the episode on a dance sequence. The group is actually very happy about the fact that they actually get to keep the meteor, and merely even remarks that this is a really brilliant idea, whereas the general just remarks that he and his lieutenant were just going to turn it into a weapon, and are happy that they didn't think of that because this is a much better idea. Whereas Katz and LeQuack are there as well. And it's not, and they even point out that if they can't beat them, they might as well join them. So they decide to actually join in the dance sequence as well. Quite just remarking about that he didn't know he could move the way he did, and is just very happy about being able to move the way he can. But yeah, in any case, then at which point the Mystery Inc. gang actually proceeds to remark about how this is definitely one of the weirdest mysteries they've ever had to solve. But they wouldn't trade it away for anything else. And at which point Muriel decides to offer up one last riddle, which is the answer to this one is Courage Dooby-Doo. So they wind up combining their catchphrases as well. But then Daphne actually remarks that she's actually happy that they didn't have to arrest Eustace because, as they point out, they were pretty convinced he was the bad guy the whole time because, yeah, Eustace has that effect on people. But then they do wonder, the group actually collectively wonders where Eustace actually is, and as it turns out, Eustace was taking a bath. He actually walks down with a towel around his waist, I think, or another towel. No, it's a towel. But he walks down and he's actually singing his song. he's actually singing out of nowhere to himself while he's actually taking a shower. But when he walks down, he's annoyed that his money is gone, and then even more annoyed that he actually winds up joining in the dance sequence. And then Courage actually tells everybody good night, and then the episode closes with the signature Irish from the Courage the Cowardly Dog series. So yeah, this movie is great. What else can I say about this movie? This movie is just fantastic because it blends the mystery element that Scooby-Doo does well, while also kind of addressing the fact that Scooby-Doo occasionally has supernatural elements in it by addressing the fact that by actually introducing Courage the Cowardly Dog into the mix, which is very weird and wonderful. And this episode actually is a really good mix of the two. It actually works really well, and I do very much like it for that. But yeah, this episode is just this movie is just very, very interesting and fascinating, and I do very much enjoy it. But in any case, yeah, just I guess that does it for my Coverage of Courage month then. So yeah, so to summarize, we have covered everything from humble beginnings with the cartoon show up to the feature-length movie that debuted this year, 2021, and it is a very great movie in that. But also sadly there is one big caveat with this, which is that with Muriel's voice actor Theo White actually, I thought I would save this for last, but unfortunately Theo White, the voice actress of Muriel, isn't really with us anymore. She unfortunately passed away during the post-production of this movie, so unfortunately she is no longer around to actually provide the voice of Muriel, and that's very sad. And when that happened, there was actually a lot of fan art of celebrating her and wishing her goodbye, which is very much appreciated, and I very much am happy that the fandom decided to send her off that way. But yeah, that is a very tragic note to end this episode on. But this whole series as a whole. But it does need to be brought up. So there we go. But in any case, yeah, I did very much enjoy this, and I hope you guys did enjoy this little thing that I've done for the month of October. And I hope you guys will join me tomorrow or whatever else for whatever it is I decide to cover next. I'm probably going to need a day or two to actually cover something, but yeah, long story short, just go check this out and yeah, if you guys want to know if you guys did enjoy this, Courage the Cowardly Dog available on Amazon, as is the movie. So go. I mean, you can't find Fog of Courage or Chicken from Outer Space on this. But everything, all the other episodes are on here, and then the movie is available on Amazon as well, either through Amazon Prime Video or just to buy straight outright. So yeah, go check that out. I'll probably link both down in the description, so you can actually go and buy them. But yeah, long story short, I do highly recommend this series. I am very glad that I actually wound up covering it on the channel as part of an October celebration, and I hope you guys very much enjoyed. I very much had a lot of fun doing this. But yeah, if I had to list what my favorite part of Courage the Cowardly Dog probably is, I'm not entirely sure what my favorite episode would be. Now that I've seen them all and also covered the movie as well, I'm not entirely sure. But if I had to say one, probably Windmill Vandals is probably my favorite, since it's one of the few episodes where the entire family is aware of the disaster and not just Courage. And on top of that, Eustace actually winds up contributing to the plot and actually winds up helping solve the problem in that episode. So that is definitely my favorite episode, and it does give a little bit of lore into the series as well. So I very much like that episode for that reason. But yeah, to each their own. If you've got a different episode that you liked, I've reviewed them all. Just go find that appropriate video and tell me which one you like. So yeah, just go find the video, the entire playlist. Just go check it out. But in any case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this series. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on with the channel, then that is actually the best way to do that. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm always saying thanks. So be sure to go check this out. Obviously, this was a very big project to have carried out for the entire month of October, and I'm glad to have done it. But yeah, I hope you guys will actually continue to support future projects like this. So just go check that out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. For some bomb videos, the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you guys want to see more of it, try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both those videos out. And also, I don't know if I brought it up, but go check out my Twitch. I was originally going to do the watch along for this on Twitch, but that's not entirely off the table where I can do a watch along at some point. But yeah, that didn't wind up working out the way I thought. So just go check that out. Just go check that out anyway. I'm going to get back on my regular schedule. I'm going to be streaming hopefully every Sunday going forward. So just go check that out. But yeah, in any case, just thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.